Hello and welcome to Beyond Borders Briefing, the channel where we bring you the latest news and analysis from around the world. Today, we're going to talk about a controversial law in Israel that could determine the fate of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is facing a corruption trial. The law, which was passed in March 2023, makes it very difficult to declare a prime minister unfit for office due to physical or mental incapacity. According to the law, only the prime minister himself or the cabinet, with a two-thirds majority, can make such a declaration, and it would need to be ratified by a two-thirds majority in the parliament, known as the Knesset. The law is an amendment to one of Israel's basic laws, the closest thing the country has to a constitution. It was passed before legislation started on a judicial overhaul package, pushed by Netanyahu's right-wing government, that has split the country and led to months of protests by those who argue that it chips away at Israel's democracy and weakens its judiciary. The law is being challenged by 3 petitions in the Supreme Court, which heard arguments on Thursday. The petitioners argue that the law was passed solely for Netanyahu's benefit, making it a misuse of constituent authority. That's one of the bases on which the Supreme Court can, in theory, strike down amendments to a basic law. However, the court has never done so before. Netanyahu is Israel's first sitting prime minister to stand trial over a series of graft allegations, which he denies. He is accused of accepting bribes, fraud and breach of trust in 3 cases involving wealthy businessmen and media moguls. He has repeatedly claimed that he is the victim of a political witch hunt orchestrated by his opponents and the media. The trial began in May 2020 and is expected to last for several years. In February 2021, an anti-corruption group lodged a petition with the Supreme Court aimed at declaring Netanyahu unfit for office over his trial. The court rejected the petition, ruling that Netanyahu could stay in power despite the corruption charges against him. The Supreme Court has not yet announced when it will issue its verdict on the incapacity law. If it upholds the law, it could make it almost impossible for anyone to remove Netanyahu from office unless he resigns or loses an election. If it strikes down the law, it could open the door for new legal challenges against Netanyahu's fitness to govern. The incapacity law is not the only judicial reform that has sparked controversy and criticism in Israel. Earlier this month, the Supreme Court heard arguments about another law, passed in July 2023, that took away its ability to stop government actions justices ruled to be unreasonable. It was also an amendment to a basic law. The government says that these reforms are necessary to rebalance powers between elected officials and judges, who they accuse of overstepping their authority and interfering in political matters. The opposition and civil society groups say that these reforms are an attempt by Netanyahu and his allies to undermine the rule of law and evade accountability. The judicial reforms have also fueled one of Israel's biggest ever protest movements against the government, which took office in December 2022 and includes extreme right and ultra-Orthodox parties. Demonstrations have been held at least weekly since January 2023 and consistently drawn tens of thousands of people to rally against Netanyahu and his policies. The protesters demand that Netanyahu resign or be removed from office over his corruption trial and his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. They also call for an end to the judicial reforms and for more respect for democracy and human rights. The protests have been largely peaceful, but there have been some clashes with police and counter-protesters who support Netanyahu. The police have been accused of using excessive force and arresting activists without justification. The protesters have also faced threats and violence from far-right groups who view them as traitors and enemies of Israel. The protests show no sign of abating anytime soon, as neither side seems willing to compromise or back down. The political situation in Israel remains tense and uncertain, as Netanyahu faces both legal and popular challenges to his rule. That's all for today's episode of Beyond Borders Briefing. Thank you for watching and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more news and analysis from around the world.